The southern Hemi appears to be recharging. I am Mark Sponsler, and welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, May 26th.
Stormsurf, waves, weather, buoys, altimetry, snow, temperatures, El Nino, weather analysis, essential data for outdoor people, all the time, no hype.
If you enjoy the video, be sure and like. If you have any questions or comments, write them up down below. We'd be happy to answer. If you haven't subscribed, click the Stormsurf icon down in the lower right-hand corner on the screen. You'll get automatic notifications when we post the videos, typically on Sunday evenings. And if you'd like to make a small contribution to the cause, you may. Hit the super thanks button down below, the heart with the $sign in it. With that, I'd like to thank the folks that donated last week. Leona Roberts, not only once but twice, thank you very much, and a very generous contribution indeed. Mont the Drifter, thank you. Coach Nate, longtime viewer and contributor, thanks Coach, we really appreciate it. And then our other two real long-time contributors, Tim Caston, Evolution Moto, thank you guys so much, I really appreciate it. With that, let's get to work. We'll start by looking at significant wave heights for the South Pacific Ocean. Yes, we see a little bit of activity southeast of New Zealand. This is supposed to build and grow a little bit more. And this is the start of what appears to be a progressive pattern of gales over the South Pacific. I don't want to say that's for sure because the models always are kind of flaky more than a couple days out. But it looks like things are starting to wake up again. So there is hope. But before we get into the forecast, let's just take a look and see what's going on right now. We're going to start by looking at buoys along the California and Hawaii coast. We're starting up in Northern California. Point Reyes buoy number 029, of course, off of Point Reyes, just a bit north of San Francisco. We're looking at all the energy that's hitting that buoy, all the way out from 33.3 second period, really long period energy, which there is none, the whole way down to 5 second period. This would just be like pure, basically unrideable wind chop. We see a spike of energy here in around the 7 second period, so that's definitely wind swell. And then you see little bits of energy out here in the 13 second, 20 second period range, but half a foot or less, really nothing significant, it appears. Anyway, we used some fancy math to put it all together. First, the primary swell, 4.8 feet at 7.7 seconds and 310 degrees. That theoretically makes surf at 3.7 feet, but that'd be like waist to chest high. It's not even that big, maybe waist high at top spots. And then some secondary swell, 1.4 feet at 13.5 seconds from 202 degrees. That is surf at 1.5 to 2 feet and knee high or so. That would be probably the leftover swell from a central South Pacific gale that most of that swell hit the early part of this previous week, and that's all fading out and really not even rideable at this time. When we go down south, we're going to look at Southern California, the Point Loma South buoy 191. This is off of San Diego, pretty much as far south as we can go. Again, we're looking at the profile, all the energy that's hitting the buoy, the wind swell, pretty much completely shadowed by the Channel Islands. Whatever ground swell there is, you see little bits and pieces of stuff from anywhere from 11 seconds up to 20 seconds, but all of it like a third of a foot, maybe a little bit more than half of a foot. Primary swell, here you go again, 1.4 feet, 13.2 seconds from 192 degrees. That would put surf right at 2 feet, and that's probably about what it is down south. And then there's some secondary swell mixed in there, 0.8 of a feet at 17 seconds from 206 degrees, but that's not even 2 feet high, so not a whole lot going on there. And then our final stop on the tour, the Lanai buoy, South Lanai, good proxy for what's going on the south shore of Oahu. Buoy number 239. And again, you see this sort of very small surf pattern, most energy in the 13, 14 second period range, and a little bump of something out at 22 seconds, but very small. Primary swell, 1.7 feet at 13.1 seconds from 172 degrees. So again, like 2 feet. It is rideable in the south shore of Oahu. And then some secondary swell, 1.2 feet at 9.6 degrees, 168 degrees. That's probably wraparound wind swell or locally generated wind swell and not even 2 feet high. All right, so let's go back in time to Sunday 2 weeks ago. This gale developed, it started south of New Zealand, but really focused on the south central Pacific. This was the system that made the swell that hit California Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I think it actually even started on Sunday a week ago. That system then faded out. And then since then, well, there's been bits and pieces of other energy. You see this little gale that pushed south of Tasmania Thursday the 16th, but then it died before it ever got into the Pacific. Nothing happened there. We had this other little system south of Tasmania again, but it pretty much just got slammed by the Ross Ice Shelf there and shredded. So nothing from that. We're into Tuesday of this week now, the 21st, moving into the 22nd of May, and you see nothing going on. There was this little gale that developed right here on Thursday, so just 3 days ago. Very small area fetch, 30-foot seas building to right about there, 35 feet. So this is the highest seas over this entire domain. You see a very small fetch area. Maybe some tiny, small, southerly angled swell. You see it pushed pretty well to the north into Friday. So small southerly swell is likely from that, mainly for Southern California, and even that's kind of dubious as to how much swell we're actually going to get from it. And then we go back. Let's go back to late Friday. Another gale. This is Friday the 24th of May. Another gale developed south of New Zealand, 26-foot seas. Continuing, then we got a little spurt of 28.6-foot seas just off of the southern tip of New Zealand on Saturday, the 25th of May. And let's see, we get to right about, there's where we are today. That system started to fade. Swell has been generated from that. Not very much swell, seeing how peak sea heights were only 28 feet. And typically, if there aren't at least 30-foot seas, I wouldn't even look twice at it. But, you know, there's been a pretty good stretch here of nothing going on. So this would put some swell into Hawaii like a week from now, and California maybe 9 or maybe even 10 days after that, or 10 days from today. So it's going to be a little bit still. Good time to maybe go take care of business, work at your real job, whatever else you have to do while we wait for some swell to materialize. But the forecast is looking optimistic. So let's go take a look at that. So we'll start by looking at upper level winds, Jetstream level winds. These winds are up about 30,000 feet. They help support the formation of gales when those gales form, help direct their track. We're looking for a trough, a dip in the jet to the north, and you see that right here, plain as day. What that helps do is create a counterclockwise or a clockwise flow aloft and down at the ocean surface. That is the identifier of low pressure. And of course, low pressure, if it's strong enough, generates winds. Winds that get traction on the ocean surface and create seas. Seas, as they radiate away from the fetch area, get groomed out and eventually turn into swell. Swell, when it hits your beach, turns into surf. So we have a trough. Things looking good. This is the trough that is supporting that 28-foot sea area and low pressure off of New Zealand. Now notice, though, east of it, big ridge pushing the whole way into Antarctica. High pressure in this split jet stream flow here above, doing nothing for producing meaningful swell. So this is the main attraction right now. And let me warn you as I go through this, so NOAA's had some issues with their data. They were doing some server maintenance. A bunch of the servers were down. They still are. They're working through it. I'm talking with them, and they're aware of the situation. So you will see garbage show up in this animation as we go through it, but I'm pretty certain it's actually looking better than it was. It wasn't even working 2 days ago, so no, it's getting there. So we'll just have to be patient. All right, as we get into Sunday, there's your bad data. The trough continues, but weakly, but it persists east and southeast of New Zealand. The thought is that there will be some additional low pressure develop from or out of this trough, even though the trough doesn't look particularly interesting. Now, here's where things start getting interesting. Winds build under New Zealand as we get into Thursday, the 30th of May, with, 130-knot winds building, starting to dig out a trough here. So we get later in the day, Thursday, and then into Friday, we have this pretty broad, it's almost cut off trough, but that should be enough. And notice the wind energy is pushing up, starting to tap into wind energy from the northern branch of the jet stream. The two of those together creating some decent winds. That provides reasonable potential to produce some sort of a gale. And this would be on Saturday. And then you see, look at this pattern as we get into Sunday, a week from now, the 2nd of June, a much broader trough. There is still winds here sort of cutting it off, but then you get into 180 hours out and a broad upper level trough supportive of gale development appears likely for the upper reaches of the South Central Pacific. So if you believe the model's a week out, there is some potential. Right, let's go take a look down at the surface. But before we do that, there is one little thing I wanted to show you. So this is the Northern Hemisphere jet stream. We haven't been looking at it. There's not a lot of activity forecast, but the jet itself still pretty consolidated. We're just blasting through this. Look at this jet. I mean, if this was August, I'd be getting excited. This is likely the El Nino fueled jet stream in the Northern Hemisphere, still holding together pretty well. You've been reading about massive tornado outbreaks in the plain states. All that is fuel from El Nino and the jet stream pushing right over that area, supporting this big collision of air masses between energy coming out of the Pacific and then warm, moist air seeping up from the Gulf of Mexico. Sea surface temperatures are much warmer than normal there, and all that's colliding somewhere over the Central Plains states, fueling tornado development. And anyway, you go a week out, this looks like a full-on almost winter jet stream pattern. Now, I don't expect that's really going to happen, but it looks pretty good. That bodes well or poorly, depending on how you look at it, for more weather in the Central Plains states. Folks have been complaining all during El Nino about lack of moisture into Texas and that part of the United States. I think some of that is going to get resolved here and pretty quickly. All right, back to the Southern Hemisphere and our trough that was just south of New Zealand. See, there's still winds 35 knots. Now, typically I want to see 40. There's a little tiny area, 45 knot winds from the southwest aimed north right in there. Let's see if that does. And you see it builds theoretically as we get into Sunday evening. Again, 45, almost 50 knot winds there, aimed off to the north, but over a very small area, continuing into Monday. So gale development looks likely in the area southeast of New Zealand into at least Tuesday, the 28th of May. So some potential there. Now we know there is another trough coming, and here you go as we get into Thursday night and way up to the north, some sort of 30 to 35 to almost 40 knot winds developing. There you go, building even more significant Thursday evening proper, continuing into Friday, 45 knot winds as we get into Saturday, aimed off to the northeast. And this Hawaii's at like 157, so right on the edge of producing something relative to Hawaii, certainly for Tahiti and certainly for the U.S. West Coast, if all this comes to pass. So a pretty healthy pattern looks possible. And what effect do those winds have on the ocean surface? Okay, well, here we go. We have 26.4 foot seas over a tiny area just off of northern New Zealand. So not a whole lot there. But here comes our next fetch, building with 28, 29 foot seas, building to 33 feet on Monday morning, 35 feet midday Monday, and 34 feet again later Monday afternoon, then fading from there. Small bit of swell, looks likely from that, pushing off to the northeast. So something to look forward to until the next theoretically bigger system. You see it trying to wind up here with 28 foot seas. This will be Friday night into Saturday, June 1st. What do we have? 29 foot seas, but not really exceeding that mark. Secondary fetch building behind that with 31 foot seas. Oh, and that's a bad frame there. So that's the last bit of data we have. So potential, but nothing, no big 35 foot seas or anything over a broad area, but certainly something to be monitoring as we get deeper into the work week. So for any gale like under New Zealand, it takes about a week to get to Hawaii and about 9 days to get to the U.S. West Coast. So we have the weakest of gales under New Zealand, so the swell from that won't arrive into Hawaii until about a week from now, and then into the early part of the next work week for California. So that'd be like June 3rd or 4th, something like that. So in the meantime, looking for potential for wind swell. We've certainly had piles of wind along the California coast, north of Point Conception, and wind swell that kind of marred what otherwise was a beautiful, long period, well-angled New Zealand run of New Zealand swell, and it just got pretty much hacked apart. Even at the most protected breaks, a lot of warble in the water. So here we are Sunday, light northwest wind flow, so high pressure north of Hawaii, the typical sort of pattern, though still, given the North Pacific jet stream, low pressure in the Gulf of Alaska has not given up the ghost. So let's get ourselves into Monday, see where we're at. Northwest winds, 15, barely 20 knots. That's probably not enough to make any meaningful wind swell relative to California. Trades, 15 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. Tuesday, pretty much the same pattern, both locations. Get into Wednesday, a gradient starts building, 20 to 25 knot winds the whole way from Point Conception northward. So maybe some building wind swell for California for sure. Look at 30 knot north winds just off of, I'll call it Bodega Bay as we get into Wednesday evening. Trades for the Hawaiian Islands. Thursday, again, great potential for building wind swell into exposed breaks north of Point Conception with up to 35 knot winds off of Cape Mendocino. Trades for the Hawaiian Islands. And let's see, then we get into, where were we? Friday. Oh, and then the model kind of loses it here. Let's see if we can get it back to, there we go, back together. On Friday, again, northwest winds and potential for wind swell. Trades for the Hawaiian Islands. Saturday, again, 20 to 25 knot winds, not as strong, so lighter wind swell for the beginning of the weekend for California. Trades pretty solid, 15 knots over a broad area, so east wind swell for the Hawaiian Islands. Sunday, trades start fading. Look at this, though, low pressure. Let's see if this is, yep, that is actually semi-believable. Nope, that one's a bad frame. So anyway, wind swell for California as we get even a week out. Wind swell, east wind swell for the Hawaiian Islands. This wind out here, maybe some like west-northwest wind swell for California long-term, but we'll see. Don't know if it's really believable. So let's do a quick look at surf forecast. We'll start Ocean Beach, Northern California. You see surf in the 2-foot range, pretty small the whole way into Wednesday. Then some sort of wind swell materializes on the charts. It might actually happen before then. Surf 8 feet. No, this chart typically overestimates it. Out in the open ocean, yeah, there's big swell, but by the time it wraps into the coast, it's normally much smaller. But you see a steadily declining wind swell pattern as we get into later part of next week, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Peak of all the wind swell looks to be on Thursday. You can see swell heights here, 8 feet at 9 seconds, 7 feet at 9 seconds. You get the general idea. And prior to that, just this background sort of southern Hemi swell pattern of 1.5 feet at 12 seconds, slowly fading out to nothing. We go down to Southern California, San Diego, pretty much the same pattern. No real surf in the 1.5 to maybe 2-foot range, a little pulse of wind swell as we get into Thursday in the 2-foot range, then maybe something a little bit more as we get into Saturday and Sunday with surf in the 2.5-foot range. Primary swell in the 1.5-foot range at 12 to 13 seconds, fading from there. Wind swell midweek, 3 feet at 7 to 8 seconds, and then a little bit of background southern hemi swell in the 1.5 to 2-foot range for the weekend at 14 to 15 seconds. So really nothing significant till the weekend. Let's go take a quick look at Hawaii. South shore of Oahu with surf heights in the 1.5 to maybe 2-foot range the whole way through the week into Friday. And then as we get into Saturday, surf heights in the 3-foot range. Let's look at swell. Pretty much nothing, just little bits of 1 foot at 12 seconds sort of surf. And then finally 2 feet at 15 to 16 seconds from the south. So really no surf till a week from now, the weekend. All right, let's go take a look long-term, the long-term outlook. we're going to examine the two major weather oscillations that affect surf and swell production long term. The MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation, and ENSO, the El Nino Southern Oscillation. We'll start by looking for signs of the active phase of the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation. There are two phases, the active phase and the inactive phase. The active phase is the one we're interested in. It's like a low-pressure system. The inactive phase is not a good one. It is effectively a high-pressure system. The MJO rotates west to east around the planet on the equator. The active phase on one side of the planet, the inactive phase on the other, rotating around. When the active phase starts pushing into the West Pacific, because it is a low-pressure system, it takes warm, moist air that's down at the ocean's surface, starts lifting it aloft. That hits the jet stream. It energizes the jet stream. A stronger jet stream consolidates the jet stream, helps create troughs, which create storms, which create surf, and that's what we want to see. The inactive phase of the jet stream does the exact opposite. It's a high-pressure system, so it creates falling air over the West Pacific, does not allow moisture to get up into the atmosphere, steals energy from the jet gets weak and splits, and you end up with a bunch of high pressure at the ocean surface and no swell production. All right. The other thing the active phase, the good phase of the MJO does is because it is like a low pressure system, it dampens trade winds. The inactive phase of the MJO, because it's a high pressure, like a high pressure system, high pressure feeds trade winds, and so what we're looking for on this chart is signs of whether trade winds are weaker than or stronger than normal. Weaker than normal trade winds suggest the active phase of the MJO. Stronger than normal trade winds suggest the inactive phase. All right, so this is data from the TAO buoy array, a series of buoys strung across the equator used for monitoring El Nino. This is the East Pacific, this is the West Pacific, here's the equator. International date lines right here, so that's a good bit west of Hawaii. There is New Guinea right there. The arrows is all we're looking at. The longer the arrow, the stronger the wind. So you see trades out of the east, pretty strong over the East Pacific, same deal over the Central Pacific, and same deal over the West Pacific. So you go, well, that doesn't look good. But it's actually not the wind speeds, it is the anomalies, the difference from normal for this time of year. If trades are stronger than normal, then one goes, oh, that's the inactive phase of the MJO. If trade winds are weaker than normal, they go, oh, that's a sign of the active phase of the MJO. So over the East Pacific, we're looking at the arrows, and trades are maybe just slightly stronger than normal. When we get to the Central Pacific, they're pretty much neutral, neither stronger nor weaker than normal, and same deal over the West Pacific. So pretty much a normal trade wind pattern. Just looking at this alone, I'd say the MJO is pretty weak and no clear, obvious sign. Let's go dig a little deeper. So here's the forecast for the next 2 weeks. 850 millibar zonal wind anomalies. So this is the wind stronger or weaker than normal? The anomalies. If it's blues here, those are stronger easterly trades than normal. One could say the inactive phase of the MJO. The oranges and reds, westerly anomalies, weaker than normal trades. But this is the whole planet on one chart. The date line runs right here. The Pacific starts at about 125 east, so this is where New Guinea is, so right here, okay? And most of this active, inactive MJO thing does its magic over in the West Pacific. So from 170 west to about 125 east, so right in this area. This is past performance here. So you can see we had westerly anomalies, some sort of weak active phase of the MJO in the month of May, but that has given way to very strong trades. So one would say the inactive phase of the MJO, this is today right here. And we see westerly anomalies over here in the Indian Ocean, but they don't make any progress at all into the Pacific over the entire 2-week model run. This is kind of a classic sign of the development of La Nina. High pressure building over the Pacific, enhancing trade winds, and low pressure that was over the date line during our past winter, now moving back, retrograding into the Indian Ocean, where the westerly anomalies are. So you get this sort of brick wall between the two, and we all kind of know that La Nina isn't great for storm production in the Pacific, and that's exactly what this looks like. But this only goes out 2 weeks. This is not really a trend. It's just a 2-week window. And we do know, looking at the models, that there is some storm production forecast. So the inactive phase of the MJO and La Nina does not preclude storm development, but what it says is the length, duration, and strength of those storms when they do form tend to be a lot more sporadic, not as long, and not having as much of a impact on the Pacific Ocean as they would have during during an El Nino period when low pressure is over the dateline. All right, so here's another model that goes out 2 weeks. This is outgoing long wave radiation, just fancy words for cloud cover. You take a satellite beam, a radar beam down, bounce it off the ocean surface. It comes back to the satellite. The return echo, if it's weaker than normal, suggests there's something that's preventing the signal from getting back to the satellite, and that would be clouds and water vapor. All right, using that, you can see there's areas of orange, that's drier than normal air, cloud-free skies, roughly construed to be the inactive phase of the MJO, and blue, which is very cloudy skies, which means a very difficult time getting a signal to bounce off the ocean and return up to the satellite. So a lot of cloudy areas, so roughly construed to be the active phase of the MJO. 5 days from now, you see a weak active phase trying to move into the West Pacific, and then fully making it into the West Pacific 10 days from now and 15 days from now, 2 weeks from now. So this is a little bit different than what the previous model just showed. Now, this is a statistic model. This is a dynamic model, the GEFS model, the exact same model that we used to look at the previous chart. This is the ensemble version of it. It, too, is saying more cloud cover, the active phase of the MJO moving into the West Pacific. Oh, and just for, there's the dateline there. There's the equator. South America, Central America, Hawaii, New Guinea there. The all-important Kelvin wave generation area, or West Pacific, right here is where all the magic happens. So let's see if we can do it. Yes, so here's the statistic model. Here's the dynamic model. They both are saying some sort of active phase 2 weeks from now. Let's keep going. All right, phase diagrams for the same two models. Statistic model here, dynamic model here. How do you read this? What's this even signify? This shows you the progress of the active phase of the MJO around the planet. So the MJO moves from the Indian Ocean to the maritime continent, that'd be like Bali, to the West Pacific, to the East Pacific, under the United States. It moves on the equator, over the Atlantic, over Africa, back to the Indian Ocean. The heavy dot is where the active phase is. And the further that dot is away from the circle, the stronger the active phase is. So the active phase today, somewhere in the far East Indian Ocean, working its way to the maritime continent. 1, 2, 3 different forecast outcomes all have it right at the verge of moving into the West Pacific 2 weeks from now. But anywhere from, if you're inside the circle, very, very weak. If you're out here, if you're out in this region of the chart, very strong. So this would say a modest to moderate active phase, entering the West Pacific 2 weeks from now. Now, the dynamic model, the GEFS model, just has the active phase almost into the West Pacific, but very weak. So neither is showing any major MJO activity, though at least something appears to be trying to move towards the West Pacific. But given that we're approaching summer, then, the MJO tends to be really weak in the northern hemisphere summer, stronger and more influential in the winter. Another upper level model, this is the same deal, showing areas favorable for precipitation. The greens, wet air, the oranges and reds, dry air. So this would be active phase, this would be inactive phase. This goes out 40 days. South America there, Central America. 0 is the equator. Dateline's roughly there. That's New Guinea there. So the area we're interested in is from about here to about here, the West Pacific to a little bit east of the dateline. We see here is this wet air, this projected active phase of the MJO, if you want to call that. Now this runs about a week ahead at the surface, so this says May 31st, but it's probably more like June 7th, and goes out till somewhere in about mid-June, towards the end of June. So it looks like there's a reasonably good target in June for storm production, and then things start fading out. And here comes the inactive phase of the MJO, setting up late June into early July. And here's yet another model, the CFS model, 850 millibar zonal wind anomalies. Again, are the winds stronger out of the east or stronger out of the west than normal? 850 millibars is up about 4,700 feet, but a good proxy for what's going on down at the ocean surface. All right, and this, again, this is the whole planet on one chart. The date line runs right up the middle, so the area we're interested in starts at 125 east, so from here to about 170 west, so here. This is all past performance. Now this overlays the MJO. See MJO, the black contour. Solid contour, active phase of the MJO with westerly anomalies. Dotted contour, inactive phase with the blues easterly anomalies. So that was back in March. So as we get into May, here was our last little active phase, much weaker than this one. But again, we're in the summertime with westerly anomalies. Now here we are today. This shows inactive phase of the MJO, dotted contour with easterly anomalies, fairly strong, holding for the next week to maybe week and a half. And then you see the active phase sliding in, producing westerly anomalies, making it to about 160 east, something like that. So not quite to the date line, but still this would be enough here to start as we get into, we'll say, the first week of June into mid to even later part of June, provide some support for gale development by feeding energy to the jet stream. And you see the active phase, at least in this forecast, making it the whole way across the Pacific south of California by June 22nd. And then we have the same model, but this goes out 3 months, all right? The forecast is up here. The past performance is down here. There's your date line right there. Oranges and reds, westerly anomalies. So you see big active phase back here in February. Oh, and so the far west Pacific starts at 125 east, so right there. Goes to about 170 west, so right there. But the area we're interested in is up here now. This is the forecast. All right, so you can see back in February, active phase, some other one back in March, inactive phase, a little bit of an active phase in May. Looks like we're in the inactive phase right now, blues, easterly anomalies. But here we go as we get into June 3rd. Little bit of westerly anomalies setting up, making it almost to the date line, but pretty weak, especially compared to like back here in the peak of winter. And then you see westerly anomalies continuing, but retrograding from the date line to, well, where's that? I'll just roughly do that. Almost not even in the Pacific Ocean. And we see these blues, these easterly anomalies building just east of the date line, then over the date line and retrograding into the West Pacific. This is the building La Nina pattern. Strong easterly anomalies, westerly anomalies, beginning to be focused over in the Indian Ocean. That's what happens during La Nina. The Pacific shuts down, the Atlantic and the Indian Ocean take precedence. So if you're talking about making travel plans or something, maybe late this summer, let's say in the August time frame, that would be a good time for maybe Indonesia, something like that. And then certainly as we get later into the winter, Europe and that area should get starting to be slammed by winter developing storms fed by La Nina. Right, let's overlay the MJOs. Let's see if our guess was any good. Sure enough, there's active phase of the MJO associated with westerly anomalies in the early to mid-June time frame. Then we have an inactive phase, but very weak, with weak westerly anomalies forecast. And after that, the MJO just pretty much falls apart. All right, let's look at our La Nina El Nino indicator. The low pressure bias, the dark lines here. So this is our El Nino indicator. It actually had 4 contour lines. It is gone now in the Atlantic and is already starting to build, the low pressure bias starting to build over the Indian Ocean. And the dotted contour here, in fact, we could take these other guys right out of the picture, if you will. I'll leave that in there. The dotted contour here shows you the building high pressure bias over the Pacific right on the date line area. So you see this is building La Nina, which is effectively high pressure in the Pacific, and the low pressure bias setting up in the Indian Ocean, and this also bleeds over into the Atlantic. So a change in pattern from low pressure right smack in the middle of the Atlantic to right smack in the middle of the Pacific to nowhere to be found in the Pacific. All right, so now let's go to the El Nino La Nina component of the discussion, and we're looking at ocean temperatures. We're trying to assess the state of the Pacific, and specifically the Pacific Ocean. So first off, we're looking for the balance of where warm and cold water is. This would be the West Pacific here. This is the East Pacific. This is data, again, from the TAO buoy array, those series of buoys strung across the equator used for monitoring El Nino. And here's what they're really used for, right there. Those little X's, those are the anchor lines on the buoys. X's are sensors strung down the anchor line, water temperature sensors. Use that data and a model to fill in the gaps, and you get to see the balance of warm water and cold water in the Pacific. It's pretty obvious. You can see this is, it's red, it's warm. If it's blue, it's cold. And it's really only down about 150 meters that really matter. So that'd be down about 450 to 500 feet. So this is temperatures in centigrade. 30 degree, quite warm, holding right at, was at 178 or 177 east, about where it was last week. The 29 degree isotherm at 165, I think it might have been over at 162 last week. 28 degree isotherm at 150, it was over at 140 last week. And then the 24 degree isotherm barely hanging on off of Ecuador, and up at, what, maybe 5 meters deep or something. So clearly you get the sense that trades blowing from east to west, from that way, from there, are taking warm water that normally would, and that warm water would be created by sunlight beating on the ocean surface. This is off of Ecuador. And the trades are just scraping all that warm water and pushing it off to the west where it is building up. Now, it is not the actual water temperatures that matter. This is the average temperature. It is the anomalies, difference from normal for this time of year. And this chart really isn't telling you, if anything, it's telling you even a worse picture, is that piles of cold water, subsurface, being upwelled to the surface by stronger than normal trades, warm water. It's warm, but it's only 1 degree above normal in the west right now, and nary any warm anomalies from off in the Far East. What's that, about 95 west, so somewhere in the middle of Mexico, the whole way out to 130, so well off the coast of California. Now, this is just on the equator, but a very large area of not even normal water temperatures, colder than normal water temperatures building, and a huge reserve of cold water getting ready to be sucked up to the surface by the upwelling, stronger than normal trade wind pattern there. Let's go look at some other data. GODAS subsurface water temperature. This is animation. We're just showing the most recent still frame. Basically the same picture. Piles of cold water upwelling to the surface. Warm water building in the west. This image is enhanced by satellite. It not only uses the TAO buoy array sensors, but also uses some satellite data. Let's go look at that. Sea level anomaly data. Now, how do you get that? I think last week we talked some about altimetry, the Jason 3 satellite. It made polar orbit around the planet. The planet rotates under it over a period of about a week. You cover every square inch of the Earth's planet with altimetry data, that is, beaming a radar down. The radar, based on how quickly it returns back to the satellite, tells you whether the sea heights are higher or lower than normal. We use it to look for, significant wave heights. And yes, Jake, I saw your comment. I haven't replied yet. I've been a little busy, but at some point we're going to have a discussion about what are significant seas, what is groundswell, and how does all that work. Maybe in the next video, that'd be 2 weeks from now. But for right now, sea level anomalies. All right, so this is the same satellite using the same altimetry data, but what they do is if you know what the sea heights are, you can cancel them out. If you know what the wind waves are, you can cancel them out. If you know what the tides are, you can cancel them out. And then you are left with, is the sphere of the ocean, the sphere of the ocean, is it higher or lower than normal? Why would that matter? Well, if you have cold water at depth, cold water contracts. And what that does is it'll create a divot on the ocean's surface. The water will be displaced downward. And that's a good sign that there's cold water at depth. Likewise, if you have warm water at depth, the warm water expands a little bit, displacing the water above it up. You get a little bump on the ocean surface. So this is that data, and these are centimeters. The Jason 3 satellite, I think the altimetry is good or accurate to within like 2.5 centimeters, which is an inch, which is like that much. And you're doing that from, a couple thousand miles up. So pretty impressive tech. Anyway, all right. So how do you read this? Well, Chile here, Peru here, Ecuador there, Central America there. There's the equator. There's the date line right there. New Guinea's right there. Negative anomalies. These are not minus temperatures. These are the height of the ocean, but it's negative 10, 15 centimeters. There's Ecuador right there, suggesting cold water from Ecuador the whole way out to almost the date line. And this is at depth. If you have easterly anomalies blowing here, all that cold water is going to get sucked up to the surface upwell and then get grabbed by the trades, drug across the Pacific. Only cold water does not support evaporation. If you don't have lifting air, you don't have low pressure. Instead, you get high pressure. And that just continues to reinforce an already developing pattern. And it can go on for a year or two or three until it all breaks down. And then the warm water from here sloshes back to the east in the form of a Kelvin wave, and you're back into the El Nino cycle. Upper ocean heat anomalies. This is for the past year. Here's the scale down here, but it's pretty easy to tell that the reds are warmer than normal temperatures, the blues colder than normal. This is the West Pacific here. This is the East Pacific here. These are Kelvin waves driven by active phases of the MJO and westerly anomalies, pushing warm water from the West Pacific to the East Pacific back in June of last year, in July, even in September, October, November, the final last little bit of warm water right around December, reaching into Ecuador in February, and then all the warm pool was completely tapped out in the West Pacific. You could have all the active phases you wanted and all the westerly anomalies, and all there was cold water. So now that's all marching its way across the Pacific, poised to start erupting to the surface there and feeding our developing high-pressure Pacific pattern, which is La Nina. So then we move to the surface, right? We could have all this stuff going on subsurface, but at the end of the day, it's water either evaporating or warm ocean temperatures supporting evaporation, or cold ocean temperatures supporting, I don't know what downward falling air is called, but we'll call it high pressure in La Nina. All right, so Chile, Peru, Ecuador there, Central America, the equator roughly right down the middle. Hawaii's there, the date line's off to the side. But you see blues, colder than normal temperatures. The oranges here are the remnant warm water from El Nino. But you see the cold water erupting and being dragged the whole way across the Pacific. The last of our El Nino warm water pretty much from Hawaii and west of there. Other thing to take note here, major coral bleaching event taking on or occurring in the Caribbean, warmer than normal, way warmer than normal temperatures here in this area. Again, some of this is El Nino related, some of it is related to the Tonga volcano 2 or 3 years ago, which displaced piles of moisture into the atmosphere, which helped trap heat in the planet. But some of this is just also climate change or global warming or whatever you want to call it. All right. The trend for the past 7 days, as it has been for a month or two now, blues, colder than normal temperatures. Oh yeah, in Chile, Peru, Ecuador, Central America, the equator here, you get it. Colder, this is just a 7-day trend. This is not on average or anything. Just for the past 7 days, temperatures have continued to cool from Ecuador the whole way out to a point south of Hawaii. And while temperatures build in the North Pacific and Atlantic. And then here's the backed off view. You can see it plain as day. The cold water tongue developing, La Nina. Pretty classic evolution of La Nina here on the equator in the Pacific. Warm temperatures building over here in the Indian Ocean. Also notice, we've said this week after week, much warmer than normal temperatures here in the main development region for hurricanes. Tropical waves pushing off of Africa will tap that warm, moist air, which because it's so warmer than normal, supports evaporation, and that just feeds what a hurricane is, which is effectively, it's a chimney for evacuating warm surface temperatures up high up into the atmosphere, piles of fuel the whole way in this region here. So we'll be watching this as we get deeper into the summer months. Next up, the sea surface temperature trend in the Nino 1.2 region. This is just right there by the Galapagos in Ecuador. No big surprise. Temperatures were up at like 1.2 degrees back in March, above normal. 0 is neutral. Steadily heading downward. Today's value, minus 1.139 degrees, and we think we're probably going to continue to head down some from there. But the official El Nino monitoring region, the Nino 3.4 region, so this is just 5 degrees north and south of the equator. In fact, just for a perspective, so Nino 1.2 is right here, right off of Ecuador. The Nino 3.4 region starts at 120 west, 5 degrees north and south of the equator, out to 170 west. So this area right here. So you can see cold temperatures. You can have all this cold water here, but it's not even in the official El Nino monitoring region until it's out here, which it's starting to do. And only 5 degrees north and south of the equator. So pretty much this area is starting to get filled on average with colder than normal water rather than warmer than normal water. And here's the index suggesting the temperatures are 0.193, 193 thousandths of a degree below normal. So we just passed over the threshold. Oh, what was that? Maybe on May 19th or something like that, moving into negative territory. Now, let's be clear. No big deal yet, though. I mean, you kind of look at the charts and you can see where we're headed. But normal is half a degree above normal to half a degree below normal. So theoretically, we're still in normal territory. And then it's not till you get below half a degree that we start moving into official La Nina territory. Here are the official weekly sea surface temperature anomaly values for the Nino 1.2 region, Nino 3, Nino 3.4, and Nino 4. This is the official one right here. The past week, for the week of May 15th, 0.2 degrees above normal. And you can see how, in fact, we'll go back here. You can see back in November of 20, right here, we were at 2.1 degrees above normal. That was just for a single week. But we continued to be in the 2 degree range, pretty much that whole area. Well, started even there from mid-November through to about mid-January. So that was the peak of our El Nino. And now we are effectively neutral and likely poised to start heading towards negative readings. So what does the atmosphere think is going on? Well, there is a long-running index. I think they've been measuring surface pressure in Tahiti and in Darwin, Australia for, I think it's 200 years or close to it, maybe 150 years. So that's a long-running index. When pressure is lower in Tahiti, Tahiti's in the Pacific, just a little bit south of the equator there, our index goes negative. When pressure is lower in Darwin, then our index goes positive. Today's contribution plus 9.44. So this says higher pressure over the Pacific just for a single day. Okay, looking back, where have we been? Well, we had on average, just eyeballing it, more negative numbers than positive numbers, but it seems like the positive numbers are becoming more prevalent, suggesting higher pressure building in the Pacific. Let's take a 30-day average. Today's value, still pretty close to neutral, 1.85 positive. Looking back where we were, well, we were at -7, so definitely pressure rising from a 30-day average, and then going 90 days back, a 90-day average, well, still -1.18, but this has, months of El Nino data, 90 days, 3 months of El Nino data like stacked in the back there, -7.77 we were a month ago. So we're still per the 90-day average, pretty much neutral, but you can see where the trend's going. In fact, let's look at a graph. Here's the Southern Oscillation Index, the 30-day average, graphed out. You can see back in January 2022, we were up in positive numbers, strong La Nina, the tail end of our massive 3-year La Nina. Then we hit January of 2023, that'd be last year, and boom, we just fell off the chart, went into fairly negative territory. We thought we were on our way to a super El Nino, and then we got into July and August, and the index just sort of like went back to neutral. Then it tried to regroup in October, but it was already too late. It was already, you could see, El Nino was fading even before we got to the peak of El Nino, which is typically like in the November timeframe when you thought we should have been down in this region. We were already trending upward. Yeah, we got one big spike there, some last big active phase of the MJO. But if you draw a trend line through this, we are steadily heading upward at neutral now and heading back towards La Nina. Here is the forecast for sea surface temperatures in the Nino 3.4 region, the official El Nino monitoring region. There is our peak of El Nino with temperatures at +2 degrees, neutrals right there. This was in, like November, December time frame. You can see the solid line is actuals, temperatures steadily falling right at neutral pretty much today, and heading down as we get into mid-July, temperatures down to not even quite half a degree below normal. Peak temperatures down, according to this, is minus 1.55 degrees in November, which really isn't too bad. That's one version of it. The same model, a sort of a averaged, corrected for some, PDF corrected for some things, suggests temperatures only going to maybe minus 1.3 degrees. So that's not too horribly bad. And with each run of the models, the temperatures are slowly creeping up. You know, this was down at minus 2.2 a couple months ago, so slowly creeping up. But we are still in the spring unpredictability barrier. That region from like mid-March to about June 1st, something like that. The models really struggle to get a handle on what's going on, and especially when you're transitioning from El Nino towards La Nina, and you've got, the change in season happening, and the models just have a hard time deciphering what's going on. But the good news is, we have the latest consensus model forecast. So here are all the models, and there are many, there's 25 or 30 of them here. Dynamic models, statistic models. So two different types of computer technology trying to assess what's going on. 0 is right here, plus half a degree, minus half a degree. That's considered neutral territory, but we'll just play this right here. The blue, we won't do that. The dynamic average suggests temperatures getting down to, 0.9 of a degree below normal. Okay. The statistic model saying temperatures only getting to 0.6 of a degree below normal. That said, I think some of these models are, kind of like not really good. They're doing their best. So I think the CPC here tries to put weightings on which models are more valid than others, and their consensus says temperatures going down to 1 degree below normal in the October-November timeframe. In fact, let's go just examine the details here. So here's the dynamic models. They do them in 3-month, May, June, July, August, 3-month windows. Here's all the models. The one we looked at earlier was the CFS version 2 model with temperatures down at 1.5 degrees, okay? But the average of all the dynamic models suggests temperatures getting to 0.893. That's as low as it goes. The statistic models, average of all the statistic models says minus 6.31, so just a little below half a degree. This is a little bit above 3/4 of a degree. Average of all models, just the bulk raw average, minus 3/4 of a degree, 0.745. You can't get any closer than that. So that is not that strong of a La Nina. Of course, We are still in the spring unpredictability barrier. A lot can change. Just like last year's El Nino, the model said it's going to be booming this time, this time of year. They said by the fall it's going to be, a record, a solid, very strong El Nino, and in the end it was kind of a dud. In this case, if our El Nino, so an analogy, the pendulum swings, right? If our pendulum didn't swing as far as we thought towards El Nino, hopefully the corresponding reaction to that, which La Nina is, it's a reaction to a El Nino situation, theoretically should be, well, not that strong of a La Nina in response. All right, so let's wrap this up. Where are we at? Well, right now we're kind of in the doldrums. We had a pretty good run of swell, but it kind of got marred, at least in California, by strong northwest winds. I think Hawaii also sort of ended up in the same boat too. They got a good pulse of sizable swell, but trades just kind of were ripping things apart, and south winds as well. So a bit of a break for the moment, but we do have a gale. Well, we actually had a small, tiny gale in the far southeast Pacific. No meaningful real swells coming from that. The little pulse of swell we see for next weekend will be it, and we're talking 2-foot or 3-foot surf sort of thing. Another gale has pushed under, or is pushing under, New Zealand, and forecast to maybe pulse a little bit in the next day or two. That might give us a better pulse of swell the week beyond, so at least a week from now in Hawaii and midweek relative to California. And then the models are teasing at something bigger and broader over the upper reaches of the central South Pacific a week from now, which means swell arrival, let's say a week and a half to 2 weeks from now. So potential looks decent for surf. It is all not over, and we're not down to having to grovel completely for wind swell, but you might have to do that here for the next week until we get some swell. In the meantime, looking long term, La Nina's coming. The more we get out of the spring unpredictability barrier, the better the models look in terms of the strength of our pending La Nina. Yes, we're definitely moving to La Nina. Again, the pendulum swings, and it's time to swing to the cold side of the equation. But it looks like, at least for now, hopefully not too bad. Let us know what you think. If you see something I don't see, I always value your all's opinion. We have a group of viewers from all around the planet. They see things in their local areas that might give us tidbits and hints of what's to come. So I really appreciate anyone that takes a minute to post and sort of write up what they're seeing in their local area as it relates to this bigger picture that we're talking about. But long term, it looks like the favor or the main areas are going to become the Atlantic and the Indian Ocean, and the Pacific is going to be in sort of a down phase as we get into the coming winter. That said, if it swings one way, it's eventually going to swing back. We've been waiting for the PDO to churn. I've been looking. We're nowhere near anything major happening, and I am going to make the PDO video and do an El Nino wrap-up as soon as I can get the time and share it with everybody. So that's it for this week. We will do it again shortly. If you enjoyed the video, give us a thumbs up. Write us your comments or questions. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Click the Stormsurf icon down in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. If you'd like to make a donation, you know how to do it. The special thanks button down below. And other than that, we will not do it next week. I've got some other things going on, but I will do it the week after that for sure. And so we'll see you then. Thanks for watching, and have a good one. Thank you.